Altcoins can be life-changing. Not always for a good reason either. Because the brutal truth is, most people want to find the next 10x, the 20x, the 50x, but I think a lot of those kind of days essentially are gone. Most altcoins in its current setup, not really long-term investments. I can't think of many that have changed lives over the last 5 years. So in this video, we're going to talk about research. We're going to talk about what to do, why we should kind of consider different things, and maybe management of said portfolio. Because the biggest problem that we do have, and let's get into it quite quickly, there's far too many of them. It is literally there's far too many. We cannot deny this. CoinMarketCap currently has about 51 million listed. And I know that most of them are dead, but that's the problem. Liquidity. When they're illiquid, inactive, low quality, people just become not asked. And look at the world of YouTube. Previous videos talk about how dead the world of YouTube is. When should we buy Bitcoin? And those kind of elements are kind of the consequence now of what we see with altcoins. Very, very low. Also, just in the BTC pair. And I could talk about the past, and I know that in my Patreon I do like Q&As, and people often ask about the past, and I say it a lot. It's very different. When you're talking 5 years ago, there was less altcoins. We're talking about 8 years ago, there was hardly any altcoins. It was kind of the new boom. And when we talk about liquidity going from, say, Bitcoin only into altcoins, there's now that little gray area in the middle, which is basically stable currencies. Stable currencies basically have propped the market a different way. So the question actually isn't, is the altcoin any good? Will it get attraction? Will it get sort of, that situation of scarcity or liquidity? Is it too high for it? And this is why you see a lot of new altcoins do very well initially, because the supplies are small. And then over time, we have emissions, and those emissions will eventually dilute it a little bit. And then eventually, when the interest dies because it's no longer shiny object syndrome, they crash and burn, unfortunately. But let's look at it. So on the screen, I've just created a glossary on my platform. Emissions, the rate of which new tokens are minted. Well, that's quite the problem. And I talked about this in a previous video, that a lot of these altcoins are actually quite good businesses, essentially, or however you want to look at it. It's just the way it is. Unfortunately, they use tokens, and those tokens can become a problem. Then you've got the situation of vesting, right? Which is essentially how long are they designed to be locked up for? And then obviously the whole tokenomic side of it in terms of the overall picture. Problem is, you've got three buckets you need to look at and worry about when it comes to altcoins. The first bucket is, more importantly, long term. Your Ethereums, probably, your XRPs, whatever, maybe survive, but will you get really rich off them? Maybe, but probably not, unless you bought really, really low. And those opportunities are quite probably gone now, unless we see an Ethereum at like $400 at some point in the next couple of months. You got bucket number two, which is probably cycle trading. The section of dubious kind of elements around speculation. Sector leaders, for example. Highly liquid, strong narratives, which could be good for the short term. And then you've got bucket three, which is kind of the speculation, gambling, and meme coins, the pumps, the new launches, low liquidity, shite coins, basically. Penny stocks equivalent, realistically. They can pump hard, but they can also go to zero. And I've learned that lesson a few times myself. But this is why we need to talk about stuff like this. Risk on, risk off. When should you be in an altcoin? When should you not be in an altcoin? And understanding when, it's shite, basically. Long story short, poor funding, dominance is high, stable currency movements, liquidity risk, all this kind of stuff, right? And even when we talk about, say, on the trading charts, right? I'm developing an indicator here, which is going to be quite hopefully useful in terms of the gaps between the EMA and understanding where the alignment is around different charts. Everything in the world of crypto is and has been risk off for a very, very, very long time. And when we zoom in on this on the 3-day time frame, it looks like absolute shite. When we talk about it on the daily time frame, well, it's actually at 100%. Realistically, that could have been a decent shot from this level of flipping from, levels of support into now resistance on, say, Solana. That could be heading lower potentially. That's the thing. Low liquidity, low interest, a lot of emissions. People are not asked anymore. People are panicking, and it's crap. Doesn't mean it's not going to go, high again in the future. But right now, time to buy altcoins. I think it's time to wait and see where it goes. But another thing we do need to consider a little bit here, and I know this is an old article, but I think it's quite important. The amount of hacks that we get Northern Korean. I've hacked a load, 51%. Yeah, huge increase, right? Massive. But this is the thing, individual wallets, you've got, phishing attacks through email now. People are losing their crypto very, very easily because they're not bothered about it and they click links, say whatever, and oh god, I've lost it again. There is a lot of hacks still. And that is obviously a very, very big problem when you're talking about an unregulated market, when you're on like whatever exchange and it becomes a bit of an issue. Even with exchanges, it can become an issue trying to get back in. If you've left it for a year and you're trying to get back in, where did it hold my tokens? What do I do? You get the idea. It becomes a bit messy. But I think like exchanges like this, for example, now you can see it, and I like this a lot. I like the stock market, and I think now we're seeing more of a choice where we can use existing, infrastructure of crypto to trade stock. I mean, look at SpaceX. You can trade technically SpaceX in terms of the speculation of it. Some people want that. Some people actually genuinely want that movement to be able to make some money in the world of crypto via this market. And jump in the link below. There's a really, really good promotion currently on. It's ending soon. But if you want to trade genuine like things that are moving and maybe what you might feel more safe to kind of trade, give it a go. Now, in terms of altcoin research, I am developing a tool. This is on my dashboard and it is coming soon. I've got a new API and it is pretty cool, but we need to understand that market research for altcoins is very different to, say, stock market stuff or other investments. This is the thing. I want to build something that is simple for you guys to see and understand. And yes, I do have like on here the crypto market where you can see it in terms of the obvious in the room, kind of like CoinMarketCap. But I want to kind of showcase a lot of things where you can make a clear, concise decision. Are you going to get battered by emissions? What are the tokenomics like? Is it easy to understand, for example, right? And more importantly, what does it have versus everything else? Now, this is the thing. As I said before, a lot of altcoins have done poor. But in relation to its strength versus Bitcoin, that could be a good way to make some money if you are looking at it that way. But the narrative has to speak for itself. I look at these altcoins now and I think not many of these are going to do very, very well in long term. And there's a couple. There's a couple of like regulated ones technically. There's a couple of good ones out there with like a good amount of base of users. But there's still stuff out here that I'm like, that's a bit, whoa. Where would I go with that? It's all about finding the good ones. There will be some, but not always. But again, going back to the chart here, this is why I'm developing this, because risk on, risk off is so important. This is why I've changed my channel a little bit to kind of cover that more. You need to know when to be in stuff and when not to be. And that is the hardest game to play, because I always see it with people over the course of years. And I've said this many, many times, you just get greedy. You just fall into the trap of this is going to go forever. This is going to be amazing. And this is why I want to develop this and build like a little trading area where I can do this myself, even if it is semi-automatically in terms of when should you be in altcoins, when you should be not, or short in the market, whatever it may be. Because there might actually be more money by being a bit more front-footed, forward-thinking with altcoins versus saying sitting and holding forever. And I know there's success stories of it, but if you're buying the lows of the bear market and then we're going to go into a bull market, that might be all right for a while. That might be a good 6 to 12 month hold. But buying and hoping for a 10-year kind of run on something, we all know if you bought Ethereum 5 years ago, for example, here, let me just go back in time a lot, you basically stood still for fucking years. And that's a problem where we are right now with like, look, 2021, we are literally like, wow, well done. It went up, went back down. This is not the thing you do for a long-term hold, no matter what way you look at it, realistically. But in terms of what I'm doing, I'm not touching altcoins yet. I don't think it's the right time. I think we're going to go lower. I do believe, my personal opinion of financial advice is that Bitcoin's probably going to go a bit lower than $61,000. If it does, the altcoin's going to bleed. I look at Ethereum at 1,600 thinking that's too pricey. I want that lower than that if I was to buy it. Same with Solana, I would want it lower than 63. XRP, I'd want that at least lower than 60 cents, and I know that sounds brutal, but some altcoins don't look like fair value when you compare what it was in the past. I just don't think we've had enough pain, but the pain is probably the time in which you need to wait to get these entries in, so to speak. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with buying altcoins. I'm not saying that. My point is, you just need to change how you look at it. You need to look more risk on, risk off. Should you be more speculative with them? Should you hold less and be more manageable with them? Or just do it in a trading account and ultimately have more risk management kind of going on there with maybe a bit of leverage, but ultimately tighter, better market stop losses and playing with a play pot. And that's one thing that I recommend to a lot of people. And I'd say this in my Patreon. What I play with in terms of my overall portfolio is what I'm willing to lose. Realistically, I have Bitcoin held elsewhere, and I will, if I want to rotate into a bit of altcoins or do a bit of trading, I can with less money. It's safer because I see a lot of people go all in on something at peak hype and it goes terribly wrong. And another platform, really, really good for crypto trading currently right now, fees are quite good as well, is Blowfin. There's a nice little incentive as well with the welcome bonuses. Jump in. If you're not yet done so, watch this. This is not long ago. This is in terms of Bitcoin related pricing. It's quite a good video technically, but yeah, more plans for research activities coming to my platform very, very soon.